Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Perigord, Prologue to Chapter 3 by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Prologue. He moved with a confidence and speed that belied his age, and the fact that there was almost no light on the forest floor, which would have made the journey precarious for anyone. Plato Wingard was dressed appropriately for his surroundings in warm hiking attire and carrying a well-worn leather satchel over his shoulder. Plato was probably the most famous or infamous figure in the valley, depending on who you talk to. People were always speculating on everything from his past, the interior of his home, or, most importantly, what he currently did with his time. Those who hadn't met him before would assume that Plato was just a quiet but stern-looking gentleman living peacefully in his twilight years. Yet, despite his advancing age, he kept himself physically, and more importantly, mentally, fit and agile. What had him wandering the countryside in the middle of the night was a matter of grave urgency, a mission of sorts that he dared not entrust to another. He had been out here for the past 12 hours searching desperately for something that had been hidden in the forest years before. Now, in the darkness with his torch flicking over the trail, he was more than a little concerned that his efforts were going to amount to nothing. It was then that something caught his eye. A reflection from his torch that sparkled back at him like a wink in the night. Plato stopped dead in his tracks and carefully retraced his flashlight beam to its point of origin. Nothing. He was just about to give up when he saw it flash again in the beam's light. A small circle of pressed metal the size of a man's palm embedded into the trunk of a tree. Plato moved forward cautiously, his torch trained onto the man-made object. As he was now able to see an image engraved upon its surface. A large tree, a sequoia, which was native to the area. The engraving was amazing in its detail. Plato was not only marveling at his discovery, but patting himself on the back as well, for now he knew he was on the right path. A bush rustled behind him, and Plato swung around. A figure cloaked in darkness stepped confidently forward. Plato was no stranger to confrontation. Without saying a word, he raised the torch in an attempt to identify the mysterious individual. His eyes went wide. "You!" Plato accused. His hand reached into his jacket in an attempt to free the Glock pistol resting within. Despite his many years of training, his speed and reflexes were not able to protect him from the second and third figure who had moved up silently behind him. Before Plato could turn or react, his world went black. Chapter 1. The sign standing at the top of the hill read, "Welcome to Perigord, population 3,321, home of the Black River Brewing Company." The sky-blue VW Combi sped past, its passengers studying the sign intently. The driver was an attractive woman in her late 30s. She wore her dark brown hair short, pixie style, which complemented her slender build. She had an anxious look on her face, but forced a smile toward her passenger, a teenage boy of 16 years. He also had dark brown hair, longer than the woman's though. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders. He stared brutally from his window, unsure of what awaited him at their destination. As the van crested the top of the hill, both its occupants stared wide-eyed at the view before them. A small rural town nestled within a valley, surrounded by the Gray Cloud National Park. The national park was made up of beech, spruce, and assorted varieties of pine trees, giving the forest a dark and mysterious aura. Beyond the town lay Greymead Lake, the afternoon sun's reflection on the water giving the impression of a glittering jewel. The view was breathtaking. The woman was the first to break the silence. "The pictures don't do it justice," she said. The teenage boy was also clearly impressed. "Yeah," he replied simply. The woman observed him happily. "I don't know about you, but I'm getting good vibes about this move," she said. The teenage boy didn't answer as he took in the scenery. The pair drove on in silence as their van skirted the lake. The trees on either side of the road created a thick canopy, giving the forest a dark and eerie atmosphere, with small patches of sunlight finding their way through. A large river separated the town from the valley entrance, with a simple timber and stone bridge accessing the only road in or out. The van slowed as it crossed, both passengers peering out at the rushing water below. They could see trout jumping from the crystal-clear water. "It's so beautiful," the teenage boy whispered. The woman didn't reply, but grinned to herself. As they drove into the township, they passed beautifully constructed homes made from timber and blue stone and framed with white picket fences. The town's business and infrastructure surrounded an enormous park littered with elm and cypress trees. Elegant white gazebos stood out from under their shady branches. They could see bronze statues of leaders and historical figures from Perigord's past amongst the thickets. The blue combi eventually found its way onto Main Street, and after several minutes of navigating through the traffic, came to a halt outside a conservative-looking shopfront. Its black and white sign read, "Black River Realty." The woman turned to the teenaged boy. "Let's not keep Mrs. Appleby waiting," she said eagerly. The sound of a bell chimed as they opened the front door. The interior of the office was quaint and cozy. A fireplace in the corner was roaring nicely. Tasteful antique furniture lay within, and paintings adorned the walls depicting views of the valley region. The waiting room was lit by brass lamps, illuminating the room in a pleasant glow. The front reception desk was empty, so they waited for a moment before the teenage boy leaned over and rang the bell located on the desk. "Be right there," a pleasant female voice called out. Moments later, a plump woman in her mid-50s appeared from one of the rear offices, her dark red hair arranged into an efficient-looking bob. She was dressed neatly in a gray tailored suit, looking the epitome of a professional. The realtor smiled when she saw the younger woman and the teenage boy. "You must be Dr. Page," she exclaimed, stepping forward and offering her hand. The younger woman took it and returned her smile. "Mrs. Appleby, I presume," Dr. Page replied. "Please, call me Fiona." "I'm Helen, and this is my son, Jason," Dr. Page said. Her son gave the realtor a forced smile. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am," he said formally. "Pleased to meet you, too. Would either of you care for a refreshment?" "Tea, if you have it," Helen replied. "Of course. And would you care for a soft drink, Jason?" she asked. Jason shrugged. "I hope diet is okay. I'm trying to watch my figure, and it's all I have at the moment." She smiled sheepishly. "Diet is fine," Jason replied. Fiona pointed to the nearest sofa. "Please, take a seat and I'll be back with your drinks," she said warmly. Helen walked over to the sofa and slumped into it with a groan. "Come and sit down. It's comfier than it looks," Helen offered. Jason, however, was studying one of the paintings on the wall. "No thanks," he said, his interest piqued by the unusual art. Moving closer, his eyes roamed the painting intently. A forest scene, dark with subtle touches of light. A mist, half shrouding a stone tablet of some description. Strange markings adorned its surface along with some other image Jason couldn't quite make out. Fiona entered the room carrying a tray of drinks, a smile spreading across her face when she saw Jason appraising her art. "I see you like my paintings," Fiona said proudly. Jason nodded in reply. "Yes, this one in particular. It's beautiful, but kind of disturbing at the same time," he replied. Fiona placed the tray on the coffee table. "It does have a rather unusual quality about it. The artist was also this town's founding father, Heinrich Perigord," she said matter-of-factly. Helen sat up in her seat. "How fascinating," Helen said with genuine interest. "Brilliant or mad, take your pick," Fiona said candidly. Jason's attention was now firmly on Fiona. "How so?" Fiona pulled up a chair opposite Helen, clearly enjoying the audience. She continued with her story. "Well, Heinrich settled out this way in 1822, the minister of a small congregation, of what denomination no one really knows." She paused to pour herself a cup of tea. Jason watched her tip 4 spoonfuls of sugar into her cup, a smirk appearing on his face, remembering her comment about the diet soft drink. She settled back into her chair and continued with her story. "Where was I?" she questioned. "You were talking about Heinrich's church," Jason cut in. Fiona brightened. "That's right. Heinrich's church, or, as rumor had it, his cult." Fiona paused for dramatic effect, a naughty smile appearing on her face. Heinrich was something of a pagan, the emblem of his faith, a black tree, a rare black sequoia, to be precise, one which can only be found in this valley. "Sounds so sinister," Helen interrupted, clearly intrigued. "Oh, it was," Fiona replied. Then, looking back at Jason, "If you're interested, there are plenty of books on Perigord at the library." Jason nodded thankfully, his curiosity clearly aroused. Fiona straightened the creases of her pants with her hands. "I'm sorry, I've been babbling on. You're both probably tired from your drive," she said, adopting a more professional manner. She passed some papers to Helen. "As you're aware, this isn't a sale, as the house was bequeathed to you in your uncle's will. His solicitors left the transfer of his estate to my realty, making it an easier transition. These are your original copies. The last page is for you to sign, saying that you have received the keys," Fiona said enthusiastically. Helen nodded but continued to read through the documentation, finally looking up at Fiona. "It all appears in order," she said, smiling. Then, retrieving a pen from her pocket, signed the last page of the document. Fiona handed the keys to Helen. "The phone and power were turned on earlier today, and I had a cleaner go through yesterday, giving it a good once-over. I hope you don't mind, but I also took the liberty of having your pantry and fridge stocked with some bare essentials," Fiona said warmly. "You're too kind," Helen replied. "It's just our way of welcoming you both to our little community. You're both going to love it here." "I'm sure we will," Helen replied, giving Jason a wink. Chapter 2. Jason stood on the gravel driveway, his hands covering his face. "You can open your eyes now," Helen said playfully. Dropping his hands to his sides, Jason clearly showed his displeasure at this childish game. He let out a sigh as he opened his eyes. Immediately his expression changed from annoyance to utter surprise. "I'm blown away," he said in awe. "I can't believe what I'm seeing." "You haven't seen anything yet?" Helen replied as she planted a big kiss on his cheek. "Shall we have a closer look?" The front driveway wove its way through a vivid green landscape of lush grass and beautiful trees. At its center stood an unusually large weeping willow close to 80 feet in height, its branches reaching out, creating a large umbrella of vegetation. Under the green canopy, mounted within the willow's branches, was a magnificent treehouse made of sturdy timber, a multi-leveled structure complete with a roof, windows, and a rudimentary lift with cables and pulleys. It was staggering in its attention to detail. Jason looked at his mother. "I wish I were 10 years old again," Jason said wistfully. Helen laughed out loud. "I'm serious, Mom. This is where I'm living." "How about we spend our first night in the house and go from there?" she replied. "I guess," Jason said reluctantly, as they continued their way through the grounds towards the house. Like most of the houses in the valley, their new home was built from stone and timber, a 2-story, high-set structure. The house was surrounded by mature elm trees that provided both shade and privacy. Jason walked up the stone steps that connected to a wraparound porch. Helen remained a couple of steps behind, watching his reaction closely. Looking up and down the porch, Jason was clearly impressed with the craftsmanship of the house's exterior, as well as its maintenance. Everything appeared to be freshly painted and in good repair. As he approached the front entrance, he saw a large oak door beautifully engraved with runes and inlaid with iron strips, door handle, and a wolf's head door knocker. "I can't believe this is ours," Jason said, amazed. "I haven't been here since I was a little girl. It's sad to think that I was the only relative of Uncle Plato's who remained," Helen replied. Stepping forward, she unlocked the door. "You haven't seen anything yet." Light filtered in through the dark house as they cracked open the front door. Jason and Helen stepped hesitantly inside. What greeted them could only be described as amazing. Did I also mention the house came fully furnished? Helen said proudly. Looking around the interior of the house, Jason was stunned by the furniture arranged around the front lobby and sitting room. Drop sheets covered everything, including the paintings on the walls. Walking over to a large piece, Helen ripped off the canvas cover, revealing a beautifully carved writing desk. "All this furniture is ours now, too?" Jason asked in astonishment. "That's right. Everything you see is ours. I don't know what Uncle Plato did for a living, but I know he was well-traveled and educated. His furnishings are probably worth a small fortune," Helen said. "There have been some problems with the power, though. Worst-case scenario, the house may need new wiring." "Even so, I can't believe our good luck," Jason replied. "Good luck? More like winning the lottery." They burst out laughing. "Let's unpack the car, and then we can organize something for dinner," Helen said, touching Jason affectionately on the shoulder. They sat at the large timber breakfast bar facing the kitchen, eating Chinese takeout from the cardboard containers, the room illuminated by candles. "I'll call an electrician first thing in the morning," Helen said as Jason popped an egg roll into his mouth, chewing enthusiastically. "I kind of prefer the candles," Jason replied, through a mouthful of food. Helen gave him a disgusted look. "Try and keep your mouth closed when you're eating. And yes, the candles are nice, but the novelty would wear off after a while, with constantly having to light them and blow them out. Not to mention powering your cell phone would prove difficult," Helen said. Jason smirked back. "You always say I spend way too much time listening to my music. Maybe this would be a good opportunity to sing instead," he said, proudly jumping to his feet and bursting into a hip-hop song and dance number, his singing completely off-key. "Enough, enough," Helen complained. Jason feigned a hurt look. "I could crack my knuckles with more rhythm," Helen said, teasing. "Really, you crack your knuckles to music? I'm thinking Beethoven," Jason joked. Helen smiled back patronizingly. "Very clever," she said, then pausing. "Speaking of clever, I need to speak with your new school." Jason let out a loud groan. "Can't we give it a couple of weeks or something?" he grumbled. "Poor baby, sending you back to the salt mines to do hard labor," she said. Jason rolled his eyes. Okay. We'll talk about it tomorrow," Helen said. Later that night, Jason lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. "Things will be different here. I'll be different here," he whispered to the darkness. Then, sighing deeply, he closed his eyes. Chapter 3. Helen walked down the ornate timber staircase, dressed in pink pajamas and matching slippers. Descending the staircase, she ran her hand down the smooth banister, the design of which looked like the exposed roots of a tree. She marveled at its detail. Upon reaching the ground floor, she could hear sounds emanating from the kitchen, the sizzling of the fryer, a fridge being opened, and finally her son's singing. Helen smiled as she entered. Chaos was the first thing that crossed her mind as she watched Jason attempt to make scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee, plus sing and dance all at once. She stifled a laugh and then, as if on cue, Jason whirled around to see his mother watching him intently. He grinned sheepishly, still moving to the beat in his head. "You weren't meant to be up yet. You've spoiled my surprise," Jason protested. "It's okay. The removalists are supposed to be coming early, and, prompted Jason. "And your eggs are burning," Helen replied, deadpan. Jason turned to see a plume of smoke rising from the stove. "Crap!" Jason exclaimed, grabbing the pan and moving it from the stove to the sink in one quick movement. "I hope you like your eggs well done." Helen wrinkled her nose in distaste. I think I'll go with the toast and coffee," Helen observed. Jason nodded in agreement as he tipped the burnt remains into the rubbish bin, and the pan into the sink. "Yeah, probably for the best," Jason replied. Helen poured herself a coffee, and the pair adjourned to the dining table. "I appreciate the effort, though," Helen said with a smile. Jason waved her off. "I'm just glad Fiona stocked us with some essential items. I am, after all, a valued customer," Helen beamed. Jason looked dubious. "Don't get me wrong, Mum, I'm really proud of you. But the way they're bending over for you, it's kinda unusual," Jason said diplomatically. "I know it's a little weird, but I'm trying to keep a positive spin on it." being the only vet in town carries a lot of weight in rural communities. When you're right, Jason conceded. Besides, this place is unbelievable. I'm more than happy with this deal. The removalist arrived in a small white truck an hour after breakfast, an older man in his mid-50s, balding with a handlebar mustache and built like a tattooed tank. His partner was a younger man, early 20s, blonde hair, big and beefy. His face bore a flushed complexion. He looked more like a butcher than a professional mover. The pair worked efficiently, unloading the truck, and with help from Jason they were finished before lunch. Both men were polite and wished Helen and Jason good luck before they departed. They ate a modest lunch before commencing the tedious task of unpacking boxes. After an hour, Helen decided to send Jason for a walk, as he was getting bored and becoming counterproductive. Why don't you get out of the house for a bit? Stretch your legs and check out the town, Helen suggested. I don't think that's a good idea. We still have so much to do, Jason said. It's going to take us a week to get fully unpacked, so it'll still be here when you get back, Helen replied. You're the boss, Jason sighed. I do want to check out the library Ms. Appleby mentioned, he added. Then it's settled. I'll see you when you return, Helen said. Jason grabbed his phone and earplugs before departing. The sky was clear and blue, but the day was chilly due to a cool breeze blowing. Luckily, Jason had dressed appropriately in jeans, hoodie, and canvas skater shoes. He strolled along the pavement listening to his music, a natural athleticism in his step. The way he was observing his surroundings, it was evident that he was new in town. Jason eventually found his way to Perigord's Central Park and was surprised at its size. The park appeared deserted, and after a couple of minutes of walking, he stumbled across a man selling hot dogs near a statue. Afternoon, I was wondering if you could help me. I'm trying to find the library, he asked politely. The hot dog vendor looked Jason up and down with curiosity. New in town? He asked. Jason nodded. Moved here yesterday with my mom, Jason replied. Your mom wouldn't be the new vet, would she? How did you know? Jason said, surprised at the vendor's apparent knowledge. The vendor laughed at his reaction. You know what they say about news in small towns. Jason conceded his point. You said you were looking for the library? That's right. Where can I find it? The vendor pointed over Jason's shoulder. Go that way until you reach the Grey Malkin Fountain, then turn left. You can't miss it, he said helpfully. Thanks, Jason replied. He paused before leaving and pointed to the cloaked statue behind the vendor. Who's that supposed to be? The vendor looked over his shoulder at the statue, then back at Jason. Oh, that's Heinrich Perigord, he answered. Jason looked at the statue skeptically. He really isn't what you would think of as a pioneer, Jason remarked. The vendor laughed good-naturedly. Thanks again for your help, Jason said, then turned and walked away. Continuing down the winding cobblestone path, he came to a small clearing with a fountain located in the center. Atop the fountain stood another bronze statue, this one of a soldier being mauled by wolves. The expression of fear on the soldier's face and the ferocity of the wolves appeared very real. The image was both gruesome and fascinating in its detail, not the sort of image you would expect in a public place. At the statue's base, a small, modest sign read, The Death of Greymead. Jason studied the sign intently, finding it strange that no other information was written on such an elaborate scene. A short time later, Jason found himself standing at the front of Perigord Library. The vendor was right, Jason thought. You definitely can't miss it. The library was located within the park and nestled amongst dense vegetation. It was an entirely stone structure that would have looked more at home in a South American jungle. The architect had clearly been influenced by the Mayan period, as it resembled one of their pyramids, but in shape only. There were no external steps to the top, only beautifully detailed stained glass windows depicting images of a giant tree. 2 granite statues stood guard over stone steps at the building's base that led up the entrance, framed by a large rock arch carved with ivy, and finally a simple but intimidating timber and iron door. Something primal stirred within Jason. Despite its foreboding appearance, it felt safe and familiar. Slowly, he made his way up and pushed his way through the door. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Perigord has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.